Okay, so I am going to do a brief kind of recap and overview of the Hypershader for you to kind of start getting organized and learning how to navigate it, in other words, because we will get into a lot more of this, with our UV texturing and editing, stuff like that. But just knowing what it is, basically, a lot of you may be green to the fact of like, oh, what is that? How to open up the window? It's a whole other system. Material based adding systems to your objects and stuff like that, and then we'll go over kind of some what these surface material attributes for them actually are, which a lot of it is going to be exploration and finding um, that right level for you, I guess. But just to dive right into it, um, you've got your render items up here. Well, also this little ball right here is your Hypershader view. So if you click on that, this other box is going to open up. And I like, a lot of people will just, you can just, or let me back up a little bit. Just a shortcut. Say if I wanted to add a material to this item right here, I could just right click, assign new material. This box will come up, add a blinn. Then all of a sudden you've got attributes over here. You can work like this. If you notice, everything kind of changed now. I've got this specular color, this specular level, like this reflective level. I can change the color, say to a red. I can either turn my specular color down to where I don't have it, or I could change the reflective color to another color. I could crank the level of transparency up, so if you kind of wanted to see through it, you could do that. All these different attributes, we'll get into more of this stuff like this here later on. But this whole attribute system right here is just, it's pretty basic if you got, a couple objects in there, and you're just kind of keeping track of things. That's kind of a short way to do it. I will work in the Hypershader a lot because I like to keep things organized, especially whenever I get to adding files to my objects. I like to see where everything's going and coming. And that would imply I work in my Hypershader window. Now, if you just open it straight up, you've got, this probably won't come up. It's going to come up just a box like this, where you have basically your materials up here that you can see, and you can kind of go in here and you see all these other materials. I wouldn't mess with those right now, your lights and everything. You've got a material viewer over here, you've got a property editor, you've got this little graph here, I don't know what that does, and then you've got this node base, or these create editor down here. The same way, these are my defaults. You never want to mess with these right here. This is what makes these things come in this certain color. So like every time I create a piece of geometry right there, it comes in this color. This color is what is affecting it. So if I were to click on this right here, and let me try to keep it where you can see all this, and if I were to adjust my default color to another color, every time I drop something else in here, it's going to be that color. So don't ever mess with your default color. Always keep that one clean. Now, what is all that just came up whenever I created that? I like to work in a viewport in my Hypershader, so I'll go to my viewport and open up a view, and I kind of dock it right there in the middle usually. This just makes it to where I'm not having to like do this all the time. See one thing, see another thing. I can actually select things right here. If you notice it came through with a wireframe, this may stump a lot of you. To be able to see your shading colors in a viewport, you'll need to press 6. Now, whenever I add materials to that, you can see it. If for some reason you start adding materials and you can't see your materials on your objects, try pressing 6 and see if that works for you. So first thing I want to go is I'm going to add a blinn like I just did, but I'm going to do it via my Hypershader view. Go to Maya, add a blinn, and there this thing comes up in this graph here, which I didn't know anything about. What this is it's called a node-based view, and every time you add a material or something like that, your information basically is displayed down here. And if not too many people are familiar with the node-based interface. It's really easy, I think, because you actually see your chain of commands going kind of downhill. In other words, if I were to add something to the color of this via the clacker right here and your create render nodes, if I were to add a checker, then all of a sudden it's created more information that's begin at the file and then it's channeled into the blinn out through my shader. And each one of these, you can click on one of these attributes and see kind of different things. Like you can go and change the rotation of the material. This is your material viewer right here. If you didn't notice, you can see what it looks like on a cloth, maybe water, hair. I don't know if I'd go here. I probably crashed it. Yes. Oh, well. Sphere, simple sphere. Well, it's chugging. Maybe let's not mess with this up here too much. The good old shader ball. So now how would I apply this material to this object, basically? Because where I did a shortcut a while ago and I right clicked and applied it to it, now I've just got like a list of basically materials up here. Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to name this stuff, because the more you get up here, you don't want blinn 1, blinn 2, blinn 3. Just click on your blinn and let's name this the sphere. You notice it changed up here, so I always know my material up here, which I'm going to apply to it. Now you can do this a couple different ways. You can select this and you can right click, apply material to selection. And like I said, if you don't see your material coming up in there now, then obviously you know you need to press 6 because it's probably on a different shading view. Press 6 and you should be good. You can apply it by holding the middle mouse key and dragging it over to it. So that looks good. That's how I want my sphere right there. Say I want to create another object, create a different material for that one. I've got this grid system down here. This is important too. I don't want to add another object because it's just going to start layering stuff on here. Then you start moving stuff around. I like to keep a clean palette down there. So what I do is I clear the system out, which is right here. This doesn't delete it, just clears the graph. Now if I wanted to go back and open up that system again, I'll just click on my material, right click, or graph network, and I'm back at it. So I'm going to create a new one, and this is going to be my material for my morphed sphere, whatever you wanted to name it. Now let's look at some of these attributes down here, and you can go in more depth. I've added the material attributes, kind of exactly what they are: the type, your color, your transparency, your ambient color, your incandescent. We'll get into bump mapping next week. All these different kind of attributes over here. Sometimes I've found it's just cool to just start playing around with them and seeing what you got. I'm going to turn this one back to this color right here. Make this a little bigger so I can see it. Now I want to mess with this color here, so I'm going to make sure this is selected and this attribute is selected. It doesn't seem to appear to be the right one, so I'm going to clear this out. I want to open up my graph network. There we go. So whatever I do in here, if I turn it down, you can turn the color off, in other words. What happened? It's weird. You turn your transparency up so you kind of barely see through it. Kind of mess with the ambient color. Kind of makes it more of a matte 2D style. The incandescence kind of illuminates just that object. You can get into all this stuff down here, but I wouldn't right now. This is just mainly about applying and working this whole grid system right here. And you can also, for any color, basically, you can use this clacker here and go over to your create nodes over here and add more stuff to the actual material, in other words. So say like if I have this noise material, now look at my information down here. I've changed the color on it because this noise material came through as a black and white, which I would have to go through and change the color, I think in this noise node here. Yeah, the default colors. Color offset, let's see, there we go. Ugh, that's dirty. Kind of mess with the settings. Unlimited action, but I like to use this graph down here, the node based system, because I like to see what I'm doing. Because, and if you notice over here in the attribute editor too, everything's changing over here as well. This is probably still, yeah, I hit 6 in the other viewport, so that material updates it there. Delete this. Oh, that was my default one. I don't want to change that one. So I'll open up a new scene. I'll show you how to add an image in. And the images are, it's not the same as creating basically a create image plane for image plane, which say if I had my image plane and I just wanted to add a random like poster, it's going to come through, it's going to scale right, but these image planes aren't really editable. You can't turn this into a polygon or anything. It's mainly for reference, and it doesn't render out. If you're just working in your viewport, like if I'm just doing a render view of Maya software, it doesn't render out basically. It will with Maya hardware though, but then again, everything else is going to render differently. I don't want to create an image like that. I want to actually create an image on a piece of geometry, in other words. A little rule of thumb, whenever you're creating images, bringing them in and making sure they're going to scale right, because if I just bring an image, it's probably not going to map correctly to, like, say this plane, and then you'll have to scale. I always like look at the height and width of the actual object. Let me see if I can find it on my desktop. Here it is. Properties. I know it's that aspect ratio, so I usually try to create my plane to that aspect ratio so I don't have to worry about any kind of UV editing at this moment. So if I just create the size 655 by 1023, say my channel box editor, 655, it's pretty big. It's because it's, maybe I need to redo that. 655, 1023. You'll notice it already looks like the size right there. I'm going to go ahead and scale it down because I know the aspect ratio. Oh no, let me leave it alone so I can demonstrate. So for this one per se, what I like to add is basically a lambert, because lambert doesn't have all those specular levels, excuse me, and a lot of those attributes I just don't want to deal with, because I'm not really going to be reflecting off this. It's just I'm adding an image to it, so I usually stick with just a lambert. So I'll go to my Maya creation. I'll scroll down here to lambert. Now this node here, so I'm going to change so I remember it. And I'm going to go to my color. I'm going to go to my clacker. And I'm actually going to go to File. Notice it added 2 more nodes to the information. Now your file should be in your image folder of your project. That's important because if I apply this image to a plane and I move it, I need to know where that image is going to be called at. So before you even do this, you really should have added that image to your image folder of your project. Kind of how we covered that in I think the first day, basically, in creating our project window. But I'm going to go in here to the file node and I'm going to add that image, that poster I found. Open it up and it adds it to the shader ball so you can kind of see, you can kind of go in here and adjust it if you want to, if it's not exactly right. But I know it's going to be really right because I've already kind of sized this thing to how it is. The only thing I'm worried about, maybe it would be the height and the width, and then I would just change that. So I'm just going to add that to add material to selection. Press 6. Press 6 in here in this viewport. And voila, I've got my poster created. And see, and now the fact that this is not an image plane, a free image plane, you can actually go in and you can actually kind of start modifying this if you want to, but you will stretch the image though. So like I want to extrude, kind of make it a box. Kind of mess the image up and you need to go back and use what you call the UV editor to fix the polygons, and we'll get into that later. So, but I'm just referencing saying that, you know, this image is edible, in other words. Say if I want to go back into how to fix this, you could try to find out basically your offset maybe could work a little bit somehow like that. There's tiling. The way I would fix this though is I would open up, well, I don't really want to get into it yet, but our UV editor here. I think I did this in class though, so it'd be good. And you can just select these, select the actual faces, this UV shell. You can scale this thing out a little bit, kind of stretch it to it. And notice the way everything changes over there. Kind of move it on the image itself. Just ways of quick. And the UV editor, what that is that's a 2-dimensional view basically of the actual polygons itself. This will make more sense when we start like editing 3-dimensional objects instead of these 2-dimensional objects like on face planes. But for right now, it's best just to kind of size it up and see what you can do to begin with. Just getting used to the Hypershader basically is what I'm worried about right now, or I would prefer you do. So for your exercise, open up your room that you created and just start dropping some colors in there. And I'll show you my room, kind of how I would start it. Because there's an exercise on Canvas, getting used to the Hypershader, start adding some colors to the file that you've created, to your creation. So you have your room here, you got everything kind of not labeled. So I'm going to go open up my Hypershader. It's all wireframe view now, but I'm going to press 6 so I can add some materials. I'm going to go ahead and start coloring this stuff. Everything's a default shading right now. I want to just start coloring, you know, some basic shells. I'm just going to create them white. I'm just going to use a nice blend. We didn't really talk about a Fong. Fong's kind of more like for plasticky type stuff, I guess. I'll just create one to show you some of the attributes in here. They've got this reflectivity and your reflected color of the falling, the specular shading on that. I don't use it as much because I've used a lot of Arnold standard shaders, which we'll get into more, but I would just stick with the lamberts, the blends, lamberts, and the fongs if you're just doing for this exercise. Sorry, I didn't talk about that earlier. But the attribute, the resources that I sent you under the links that have kind of descriptive about each one of those things. So say I want to create some white walls, and I want them to have like the specular levels and everything. So I'm just going to go to my Maya and just create the blends, and this is going to be my walls. I'm going to turn my specular levels down a little bit. I want them to be more matted. White for one. That's good. I'm going to create these shells right here. I'm just actually going to select 3 of these things at one time. These objects here are separate. I'm going to right click, assign material to selection. Now I've got some white walls coming in there. Something I mentioned in class that I haven't mentioned yet. You can apply materials to just certain faces. So say like I've got some stripes on this here football. Assign material selection. I'm not assigning it to the entire piece of geometry, but I do know I'm going to have some white stripes on there that I can just use that white for right there. The only thing about that is if you go and you select the whole thing again, you will reapply it. You will apply it over those things, but just to show you that you can apply these things to just certain faces. Say if I wanted to have the rest of this football be red, I would just create another blend and apply them to the other faces. So this is, I'm fine with this right here. This is what I wanted to create here. I want to drop another one in there and do it. I want to get rid of this because I don't want this in my way, so I'm going to do that and just drop another one in there. Let's create a offset blue maybe. These are going to be my my doors for my desk drawer, so I'm going to find this right here. I'm just going to middle mouse key and drag it over. Should just apply it to all. There we go. And I can go in and kind of make sure that's clicked and kind of start adjusting color levels and stuff. Make it transparent. And if you just render out some little Maya software renders, you can see kind of how these colors are coming out. Not really nothing special, but with some nice Arnold lights and everything, they'd start to look a little better. Sometimes I'll add just regular materials because I work a lot with the Arnold shaders. I will add just regular materials for like matte objects and stuff like that, but basically the navigating in the Hypershader is going to be the same, so this was important to kind of learn. Now say I wanted to make the poster, kind of how I was doing it. I don't know this size right here. I may need to change the size to my image, but I would just go in and create a lambert. I'm going to use a different inset for that though. I'm going to create that plane again. think it was 650, 1023, maybe. Obviously, it's really big. Go to my Hypershader. Now my system's getting a little cluttered here. I'm going to clear it out. I'm going to create a new, I'm going to use a lambert for this. I'm just adding an image. Go to my color, file, add my poster. Change the wording of it so I don't get lost up here. Cool, I don't have to adjust anything, but I am going to scale it down. Do a uniform scale on there. And already I'm starting to bring my room to kind of life, in other words, with just some simple colors and images. 180. Oops, wrong, 90 degrees. But you get the point, this is where I'm going with it. It may have fit in there, I'm not really sure. Oh yeah, a little long. I need to adjust this to kind of make it fit now. Or I could scale this picture in a little bit more to make it fit my frame. But really, like I said, the purpose of this is just to kind of start getting used to the Hypershader, how to work this, adding a viewport in here. The biggest thing students run into, the biggest problem is they've got so much stuff down here. Like if I were to open up another one, graph editor, then open up this graph network, then open up this graph network, close this thing, open it back up, everything starts just adding in, you start adding in all this stuff. It just gets real cluttered and you become crazy. I mean, it's a good way of keeping up with stuff, but make sure you just clear things out, every once in a while if you're only working on a few things, and it'll make your life a lot simpler. So I hope this helps. I hope this has been informative. Like I said, I'm going to leave the resources in the assignment or in the discussion too. More things to look at. Please, I mean, the Maya Toolbelt guy, he goes over a good version of it. Where's he at? Bring it up. May have it up there. I'm not really sure. The Autodesk No has a lot of stuff in it, and I'll leave links to it. The Maya Toolbelt guy, though, I've got a link to it in the assignment too. Watch his overview of things. There's certain attributes that I never mess with. So, and we're going to be messing with bump mapping next week and kind of go over what that is as we go on to the next project. But the biggest thing is learning how to drag and drop and like open this up and being able to know exactly what this, how to navigate in here is the biggest thing, and how to stay organized. So add some colors to your room and just see what you come up with. And we'll convene at the next session. Okay, guys, thanks a lot.